Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Peter Matthews, live streaming, so you can call in and talk to us and give your ideas and your thoughts to each other. Share it with me in about 15 minutes. At this time, we're going to be focusing on how the debate went last night between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton to start with. And we could say that on a few issues, they were quite different from each other. For example, on the economy, Hillary Clinton suggested that she would make massive investments in the economy by closing corporate tax loopholes and raising taxes on the super rich and bringing money in for issues such as tuition-free education for those who are from families that make less than $125,000 a year. Those students would get tuition-free education under her plan, which is a part of Bernie Sanders' plan. Bernie Sanders was offering totally tuition-free education for all students in America, but she's willing to give it to those whose parents make less than $125,000 a year. That would help stimulate the economy. Also, she was going to take some of that money and put it into rebuilding our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure, coming up with new types of transportation. So investing in infrastructure and growing jobs that way, and growing the backbone of the economy. After all, the infrastructure is the backbone of the economy. When it's strong, the rest of the economy, especially the private economy, does much better. She was also going to take that money and use it to expand programs that would help working people and poor people. So she's for more government spending by closing corporate tax loopholes and taxing the rich more to bring the money in for these programs, which she says is her way of building up the economy from the middle out, from the ground up. Donald Trump came up with a counter proposal yesterday. His proposal is quite opposite. He said that the best way to grow the economy is to cut taxes on the wealthy, and it's on everyone, but especially on the wealthy, cut more on the wealthy than the middle class, cut more for the middle class than the poor, sort of a tax cut that would be almost a flat tax cut or a regressive tax cut, actually, that helps the rich more than the middle class or poor. But the idea is that Donald Trump thinks that the wealthy people who own these businesses, the corporations, the stocks and businesses, will take that money and expand their businesses and hire the rest of us. It's called trickle-down economics for a nickname, and it really means in the formal sense supply-side economics. By cutting taxes on the investing class, as President Reagan proposed a few years ago and actually carried some of that out, by cutting taxes on the rich investors, the wealthy business people, it will actually allow them to take some of that extra money and put it into their businesses, expand production, bring in new equipment, and he also hire more workers to produce more products. So the idea there was to increase the supply of goods and services by investing in the business sector itself, by cutting taxes on them. Well, that's been tried 4 times in our history. It's been tried in our modern history. In the 1890s, massive tax cuts on the wealthy. In the 1920s, massive tax cuts on the wealthy to stimulate the economy, the Roaring 20s. And in the 1980s, on President Reagan, it was tried the first time around in his first term, massive tax cuts on the wealthy primarily, and also on the middle class. And what ended up happening? As Kevin Phillips, the eminent political historian, has noted in his works, looking at these tax cuts, he said every time this was done, tax cuts mostly were for the wealthier class in order to expand the economy, the economic business growth, so that they would hire all of us. It never happened that way. Actually, what followed in the 1890s was a recession. In the 1920s, what followed that tax cut was the Great Depression. In the 1980s, what followed Reagan's first tax cut was a recession. And the 2000s, under President George W. Bush, which were massive tax cuts, even more than what Reagan gave the wealthy, we had the Great Recession. Because what happened was we cut back on spending. The government had to borrow money and not spend so much on programs. It laid a lot of people off, middle-class people, working people, and those folks didn't have money in their pockets. The rich took their money and invested it where there are cheap labor markets, either in the global south, where the third world countries exist with cheap labor in the modern era, and back in the 1890s, they invested it in the cheap labor areas where they could drive down wages further in America. Because after all, the wealthy investors want to make profits. This is a trickle-down economics that has never worked in the last 150 years, and yet Donald Trump is actually proposing that we go back to that to see if it'll work once again. Hillary says no, invest, and much of her platform was taken from Bernie Sanders, because Bernie had a progressive, massive investment in the working middle class and the working poor by taxing the rich more, putting a transaction tax on Wall Street transactions, a small tax of less than a fraction of a percent, use those billions of dollars to give tuition-free education to all of our students, said Bernie Sanders. And Hillary took part of that and said she'll give it to those whose parents make less than $125,000 a year. So there's interesting parallels there. And of course, it'll be interesting to see what happens after this third debate was over. Not only did they talk about the economy, they talked about other issues, foreign policy, for example, in which it seemed that Hillary Clinton was saying that we need to put a no-fly zone in Syria, and that would help to protect the refugees there. And yet Trump says that if you put a no-fly zone in Syria, you could actually start a war with Russia. And there's certainly some truth to that. And the fact is, will the no-fly zone really be effective enough to save the refugees and to stop the war in Syria? We need to have a multinational, including the Syrian government and the rebels, conference and coalition building to stop the conflict in Syria, to turn down the rhetoric and the bombings that are going on there, and to help rebuild that country. There needs to be a massive world effort to do that. And frankly, we also have to make sure that some of the extreme terrorists, such as ISIS, are stopped as well in Syria and in Iraq. And that's happening today with the Iraqi government's military action against Mosul, which is held by the ISIS. So some of that is happening. Donald Trump says we should make sure that NATO nations, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, our partners in Europe, those partners, and in Canada, pay a fair share of the cost of NATO. He says the United States taxpayer and the U.S. government has been bearing an inordinate share, a larger share than what we should, of NATO costs. He wants to make those countries pay that agreed upon percentage. So that's got to be done. Those things have to be done. Trump seems to be more willing to work with Russia. He says if we get along with Russia, we can fight ISIS together. Because Russia has already decided that it's got to wipe out ISIS, since they've been also victims of terrorism from Chechnya and other places. So he wants to work as partners with Russia. Hillary Clinton is pretty much saying, wait a minute, Russia is doing all these aggressive things in Crimea and annexing it, this and that. And she needs to look at the history of the whole thing, because the Crimea used to be an integral part of the Russian Empire for hundreds of years. It was turned over by Khrushchev, the Ukrainian Russian leader. He was actually the Soviet Union, the leader of the Soviet Union of Ukrainian and Russian ancestry. Khrushchev actually turned over Crimea in an administrative role to be administered by the Ukraine, which was an internal transfer of property, basically territory, to make sure the economy would work better in that region. And it was never a case of where one section was being given to a foreign country. So these intricacies, these nuances have to be understood by Hillary Clinton, and she should not take the position that could cause us to have another Cold War or maybe exacerbate the problems that we have with Russia right now. And Trump is rightly pointing that out. He's pointing that issue out, that it's time to wind that down. On the other hand, Trump is also saying that we should let many nations become armed with nuclear weapons, that we shouldn't have to be their nuclear umbrella, that we should allow Japan and South Korea and other countries like Saudi Arabia to possess nuclear weapons. And that's a very dangerous game. We ought to be actually reducing nuclear weapons in the entire world. All the countries that own nuclear weapons that are signed on to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, should abide by Article 6. Article 6 says the countries with nuclear weapons need to dismantle and disarm their nuclear weapons and destroy them under international safeguards. And then also the countries that don't have nuclear weapons agree in return to not try to acquire any. It's Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty that many times the news media does not talk about. And I think President Obama was probably the only president in recent years to say the U.S. needs to comply with that. A couple of years ago he said, we will comply with Article 6 of the NPT. We, United States, will actually work toward disarming nuclear weapons of ours as well as the rest of the world in conjunction with each other, together, not by ourselves, not unilaterally, but together with the other nuclear weapon states. We must dismantle these horrible weapons that could actually be used through miscalculation, through extreme fear and the heightening of tensions. Sometimes an accidental war could start, which could go nuclear. And no nuclear war should or could ever be fought and won and the survival of humankind continue. Because just one limited exchange of two nuclear weapons, it's been studied by scientists, shows that the nuclear fallout that will be carried around the world through the atmosphere, through radiation all over the place, will make it very difficult to grow crops, difficult for us to breathe and to live all over the world. So that must be immediately made a top priority. That, of course, global warming or climate change, climate disruption have to both be attacked the most stringently. Problem is, while Hillary Clinton recognizes that climate change is a top issue to be worked on by coming up with clean energy and setting targets to reduce carbon emissions, Donald Trump says that climate change, the whole climate change warning, and the issue of climate change is a Chinese plot to get ahead economically. Now, is he denying the science behind climate change, where 98% of the scientists say it is real, it is human caused, it's been escalating, the temperatures have been going up, escalating in the last 100 years since the Industrial Revolution, and that it's more than likely, and actually it is, primarily human caused, and we can reduce it again, or at least put the brakes on it. So this is a very different position that Clinton and Trump are taking on climate change. It would behoove the voters to look very carefully at that and decide who to vote for. So having said these things, I would love to have the audience call in at this number that's on your screen, area code 562-234-3319. 562-234-3319. You're on with Peter Matthews, fighting for social and economic justice in the world. Please come on and give us a call, and let's hear your viewpoints on all these issues and some other issues that you might want to bring up. So please do that. We'll wait for your call. And meanwhile, we can go ahead and talk about a few more things. I'm waiting for your calls to come in now on 562-234-3319. We have be able to handle calls and have some discussion with the audience until 7:30. By the way, yesterday evening I had an excellent broadcast from Cypress College, where I teach. There was actually the student government, Associated Students of Cypress College, held a debate viewing party or reception, and we were able to watch the debate on big screen or large screen of both Trump and Clinton debating each other. And once it was over, I was able to interview many of the students at Cypress College, including the Associated Student President and Vice President, and they all had some great ideas and points to make about the debate, and great ideas as to what we should do with American foreign policy and domestic policy, including education issues. So if you could go to YouTube and look at yesterday's broadcast. It's about 48 minutes long. It was broadcast from Cypress College Associated Students. You'll see me talking, interviewing, and having the students speak out on the issues of the day, especially with the election going on, and the commentary on the debate that was viewed yesterday at the student government by all of us. So please give us a call. Go ahead and dial the number, and we'll pick up the phone right now and talk to you. If you could do that, 562-234-3319. 562-234-3319. While we're waiting for a call to come in, let's tackle the issue of education once again. Kindergarten through 12, K through 12 in the United States of America, is a very unusual education financing system. K through 12 schools in America are financed through property taxes. They're therefore the areas where they have high property values, such as Palo Alto, California, Marin County, the wealthier areas, Newport Beach down here, San Marino. These areas have very high property values, and the people that live there pay high levels or high dollars of property taxes. The percent of the property value they pay in taxes may be lower than what people who in lower income areas actually pay, but the raw dollars are much more. Therefore, the school districts in the high property value areas, such as Marin County, spend a huge amount of money, $18,000 per student per school in the public schools in Marin County, compared to $9,000 per school in Long Beach Unified School District, which is a medium level property area on the average. If you go to Southgate in southern Los Angeles County, Southgate, California, that school district is only getting about $7,500 because the bulk of the money comes from property taxes. The federal government kicks in about 10% or so. The state government kicks in maybe 10% or so, maybe a little bit more than that. And certainly the local government property taxes generate the money. It goes to state government brings it back in. So totally speaking, with local property taxes and state taxes coming in to the school districts in America, about 80% of our K through 12 schools are funded through the state of California and other states in the union. I would suggest that we need to equalize the funding per student in order to provide opportunities so all schools can have science labs, computer labs, the arts programs, sports programs, after school programs, and things that really help young people grow and flourish, especially the arts. And we need to go back to the concept of equal opportunity by doing that. Now, how should we do that? I'm not suggesting that we should bring the higher income districts down in the per pupil spending. We should bring the low income districts up to the high income districts, higher up, closer to them, by subsidizing the low income per pupil spending that's going on in the low-income areas of America. And that way we provide equal opportunity for everyone, and the young people, young students can become fully developed in their human potential, and those who want to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, artists, poets, carpenters. We have to train our carpenters, we have to train our computer programmers, we have to train many of our technical people, auto mechanics as well. And we need to train not just academics, but technical skills. And we're not doing that much in the United States anymore. We've cut out various programs in high schools that used to have shop and other things that trained for technical skills. And we need to go back to some of that, because Germany and other countries have leapfrogged ahead of us. And they're providing all kinds of skilled workforce that can provide 21st century products that we're not able to provide here because of a lack of skills. We were hoping to just take over the high-tech market and provide all the computer engineers in the world, and hope the other jobs would go somewhere else, so didn't care if they went other places. But what country can be a strong economy and build a vibrant middle class without a trained workforce, both in the semi-skilled, highly skilled, medium skilled, and technology superior areas of education? You have to be able to manufacture products, or you will not have a strong economy and a strong middle class. And we have to be able to export products if our market gets full of products here within the country. We have to be able to export our products to other parts of the world. And for that, you got to create products that people want. Look at the thin film solar panel material that China's come up with already. Thin film, which can be put on the dashboard of a car. Look at the fact that China has built 20,000 miles or more of high-speed rail, trains that go 200 miles per hour, electric trains that don't pollute, and that connect all the major Chinese cities. And we are here struggling along in the United States with some of these trains that lumber along. Quite often they're freight cars, some passenger cars that go far slower, and it's causing a lot of economic shrinkage. It's not helping expand the economy. If someone could go from here to San Francisco, Los Angeles to San Francisco, in an hour with a maglev train, for example, in Germany and Japan, they have maglev trains that go even faster than the Chinese high-speed rail. Although China now has maglev. But if we had that here, we could be in San Francisco in 1 hour, and we could work in San Francisco and live in Los Angeles, and that would work very well. Let me go ahead and answer this phone call and see who would like to talk. Hello, good evening. You're with Peter Matthews.
Yeah, hi. This is Frank calling.
Oh, hello, Frank. How are you doing, my friend?
All right.
Okay, let's see if we can bring the speaker a little closer. Go ahead.
Talking about last night's debate.
Yes. Frank wants to talk about last night's debate. In case you probably could hear him, go right ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I was, the way Donald Trump is sounding, he's sounding more and more like a dictator.
Wow.
And he's undermining the certain things that we have in democracy and the process. And he's undermining that, and once he does that, then the next guy who comes along might use the same tactic to negate the election result.
You're saying that Donald Trump is sounding more and more like a dictator?
Yes.
Okay, can you give me some examples of that so the listeners can get a handle on what you're saying exactly?
Well, first thing he said was he wasn't going to abide by the election result. We haven't had an election yet, and yet he's saying he won't abide by it unless he wins the election. He
has been calling the election rigged for many, many weeks now. And he came out yesterday in the debate when he was asked by the moderator, will each of you candidates abide by the election results regardless of who wins? And Hillary said, yes, of course I will, as all the candidates have said in the past. But Donald Trump said, well, I cannot say that right now. I'm going to wait and see. You ask me after the election occurs whether I'll go ahead and recognize it or not. And you're absolutely right. That throws in a lot of uncertainty, Frank. It questions the legitimacy of our electoral system. And that is very dangerous, because when you start questioning the legitimacy of an election system, then you undermine the whole basis of the country's democracy and the feeling that people have that the country is a fair system, that it's reflecting the people's wish. You undermine that. So Trump is saying these things. On the other hand, we have had problems with our election regularities at times, irregularities. In the primaries, for example, when Bernie and Hillary were running against each other, there were some problems there that have to be investigated further. But he's insinuating that the whole election system is completely rigged, it's set up, it's for Hillary to win, and that he may not even accept the results. Now, what are the implications, Frank? Tell us. of that? What could this stir up people to do, especially some of
Well,
the
the problem is then he's going to split the country, where the people who voted for him are going to say, well, we don't accept Hillary as the president, and well, what is he going to do? And then you're going to have a kind of a civil unrest in these states where his supporters live. They may not look at the government as a legitimate government.
So you're looking at about how many percent of the voters do you think are Donald Trump supporters right now at this moment in time?
I would usually say 30 to 40%.
30 to 40%.
That's a huge number.
That's a very big number, especially if it gets up in the 40% range.
People disagree with the majority, then you could have a potential civil war, or you can have a potential problem in these states where they're not going to pay respect to the federal government, and then they're going to tell the federal government to go away.
Mm-hmm.
That's dangerous.
So you're very concerned about this going into some type of situation which maybe go out of control, where it divides the country. There's civil strife and civil unrest that people may not trust the election results and may not see the government as legitimate, or may not see Hillary's victory as legitimate, and this could cause major social unrest, political problems for our democracy, you're saying.
Right. And on the other hand, if he wins, what happens if he can't get certain things done? He's going to push people around, push the Congress around, push Supreme Court around. What is he going to do? He's got this kind of mentality that, he is modeling himself as the Putin, and he thinks he can solve all the problems by pushing people around.
Well, the Trump supporters probably wouldn't agree with you entirely, am I right? What would they say?
Well, the thing is, we have checks and balances in this country.
Okay.
When let's say the Congress is basically Democratic, and you got a Republican president, Trump, then you're going to have a problem, huge problem.
Well, right now it looks like the U.S. Senate might go Democratic. There's a chance that 3 or 4 seats might be picked up. If 4 or 5 seats are picked up by Democrats, they'll become the majority party. The House will remain Republican more than likely. So that means you got one House, the Senate, will be Democratic, and the House will become Republican.
The House of Representatives could become Democratic as well. Then Nancy Pelosi could become a majority leader.
Well, anything could happen, but the question, we don't even know exactly who's going to turn out to vote right now. These polls are all over the place. Some polls are showing Hillary Clinton 11 points ahead of Trump. Others are showing her 7 points ahead of Trump. Others are showing her 4 points ahead of Trump. There are 2 polls. The Investor Business Daily poll, which is supposed the most accurate poll in the last 3 elections, and looking in comparisons to the results, that poll says that Trump and Hillary are tied. So there's another poll that says the same thing. So these polls are all over the place, and what's happening, the reason they have different results is no one knows exactly which voters are going to turn out. So when they guess at who the likely voters will be, these polls are coming up with different people that they're surveying. So we don't really know what could happen with the results in Congress as well. Because if many Democrats are disillusioned and stay home, they may not be able to win the House or the Senate. Now, do you have a candidate that can really fire up people at the top of the Democratic ticket who can get them really excited, as Bernie Sanders did in the spring?
Yeah, but I think that because of the fact that it looks like Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Bernie Sanders, and other people are going to campaign for Hillary Clinton.
They are campaigning. President Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Bernie Sanders, they're all campaigning for Clinton, and so is Elizabeth Warren, am I right?
Yeah, and
so they're trying to fire the people up to excitement. They're trying to get people excited to campaign for Hillary Clinton. So you think that's going to be a big enthusiasm factor right there? Is that right?
I believe so. Some people might not come out for Hillary Clinton, but on the other hand, they may come out because of the Michelle Obama aspect or Barack Obama, because there's a certain amount of loyalty to these politicians that people might come out to vote for Hillary Clinton.
That is very possible. That could be, but the problem is with transferring enthusiasm from one candidate to another, or one person who's popular to another candidate who's not so popular. It's a very, very difficult task to do. Let me tell you about Trump on the Trump side. Trump has a lot of very enthusiastic followers. However, he has dampened their enthusiasm recently, especially a big chunk of women, a big group of women who were supporting Trump, Republican women, have left him, or they're leaving him now because of his horrendous, misogynistic, anti-women comments that he's made over time, and some of these women coming out and saying he actually did some of these things to them. Am I right? So he had when that whole videotape hit a week and a half ago, that's when Trump started to nosedive. He went from almost an even playing field between him and Hillary down to 7 points behind her in many polls. So this is something that's called issue orientation. One issue can come up in an election and skew the results completely and throw them off and cause someone to lose. It looks like the issue of misogyny and the tapes and the women coming out and accusing Trump of it has actually done that to Trump's campaign. I'm not sure he can recover, but he does have a lot of enthusiastic, hardcore, never give up followers who are going to vote for him. The question is, will they be able to bring their relatives and friends along to do the same thing and get some of the non-committed people to vote because of their enthusiasm or not? There are a lot of different factors involved here. Let me ask you this. Will there be any more WikiLeaks revelations coming up, or is that finished because the Ecuadorian government has cut off Julian Assange from the internet? There's no more ability for him to get the WikiLeaks emails out, which reveal certain things, or allegedly reveal certain things about Hillary, which are not very flattering. Can this continue? Are there some WikiLeaks emails that have been released earlier, before he was cut off from the internet, that could surface all of a sudden to depress a few of the supporters of Hillary, many of whom would be potentially the Bernie Sanders supporters who she needed and still needs to win?
Well, here's what I see.
Yes, tell me.
I haven't heard anything from WikiLeaks in the last 24 hours or 48 hours.
Okay.
That's one good thing.
Okay.
Second thing is that there are many things that came out against Hillary Clinton in the email, and yet people are still steadfast on the vote for her because they are not comfortable with Trump becoming the president. And
Yes.
That's her benefit.
Okay.
Because of the fact that there are a lot of Democrats, including myself. Unless she murders somebody, then I may not vote for her. But even then, you don't have any choice because right now we have to vote for her because we don't want Trump, who's an unpredictable human being.
So are you suggesting that the Hillary vote might continue to support her, which means she's ahead right now in the polls by several points. They're going to continue supporting her because they are so distrustful of and hate Trump and are scared of Trump, fearing him. Is that why you think most people, maybe not most, but half the Hillary voters are voting for her, or maybe a third of them? You think because of that reason?
I believe that that's one of the major things that's why Democrats are not talking about Hillary's email problems. Bringing those
Okay, excuse me, Frank. Excuse me, my friend. I'm so sorry to cut you off. I'm getting a call from London. I'm supposed to be talking on Sky News pretty soon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's almost 7:30. I'm going to have to sign off because I'm with London right now on Sky News. You go to skynews.com live streaming and you can hear me at 8:30. Thank you so much.
All right.
Hello? Hello? Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great, thank you.